For centuries, the Galactic Union followed one quiet rule: never disturb humanity. It was written into old law tablets, repeated in training halls, and whispered during first contact briefings. No one could say who first created the rule. No one could say which war or disaster had forced it into existence. The rule simply was. Most believed it was symbolic, a leftover from a weaker age when the galaxy knew less and feared more. Civilizations rose and fell, stars were mapped, and technologies advanced beyond anything the rule makers could have imagined. Yet the rule remained unchanged and unexplained. Humanity lived far from the crowded heart of galactic space, on the outer edges of mapped systems. Their territory was small. Their borders were clear. Their ships were few. They did not compete for influence, and they did not join military alliances. They traded only what they needed and declined everything else. To many observers, humanity looked unimpressive. Human diplomats appeared rarely at Union assemblies. When they did, they spoke plainly and without drama. Men like Alan, Mark, and others like them wore simple clothing and carried no visible symbols of power. Women like Sarah spoke calmly, choosing words carefully, never raising their voices. They asked for nothing more than respect for their borders and freedom from interference. They did not threaten. They did not boast. They did not warn. They asked only for peace and distance. Young species found this strange, even amusing. In a galaxy where power was displayed openly and strength was proven through conquest, humanity's behavior felt outdated. Their ships were efficient but plain. Their stations were functional, not grand. Their technology worked well, but it did not inspire fear. During closed meetings, younger delegates often joked. If they are so dangerous, one would say, why do they hide so far away? Another would laugh. Maybe they were strong once. Everyone fades. Even some older civilizations had begun to doubt. The ancient fear that once surrounded humanity had softened with time. Records were sealed. Reports were incomplete. Memories faded. What remained was a rule without a story, and rules without stories are easy to break. Only a few still took it seriously. In quiet chambers far from public halls, elder representatives spoke carefully when humanity was mentioned. They avoided jokes. They avoided speculation. When asked why the rule still mattered, they would change the subject or say only that it was better not to test old boundaries. One elder once said, some doors are closed for a reason. But the younger civilizations wanted answers. They wanted proof. Humanity's worlds were watched closely. Their cities were clean, orderly, and modest in size. Humans worked, studied, and lived their lives with little concern for the wider galaxy. They did not build monuments to dominance. They did not send fleets on patrol near other borders. They looked normal. Too normal. Alan, a senior diplomat, often stood near the edge of the assembly chamber during union meetings. He listened more than he spoke. When debates grew heated, he stayed silent. When votes were cast on matters of war and expansion, humanity abstained. Mark, another representative, once summarized humanity's position in a single sentence. We prefer stability. That was all. Sarah, known among other diplomats for her calm presence, handled most external communications. When trade disputes arose, she resolved them quickly. When misunderstandings occurred, she clarified them without anger. She never threatened consequences. She never hinted at retaliation. Some found her unsettling because of that. How can they be so calm? A delegate once whispered. Everyone else prepares for conflict. Others interpreted the calm as weakness. As decades passed, exploration pushed closer to human borders. Resource surveys identified rich systems just beyond humanity's space. Younger powers began to argue that humanity was wasting valuable territory. They don't use it, they said. They don't protect it. They don't expand. At union hearings, humanity repeated the same request they had always made. Please keep your distance. No explanation followed. No justification was offered. To ambitious minds, that silence sounded like surrender. Still, the rule remained. Officially, no one crossed the line. Unofficially, the pressure grew. Private meetings were held. Maps were redrawn. Hypothetical scenarios were discussed. What if the rule is wrong? What if humanity has been overestimated? What if they cannot respond anymore? Some suggested sending a small expedition. Just to observe. Just to test. Nothing aggressive. Older members objected quietly but without force. They cited tradition. They cited caution. But tradition is a weak shield against ambition. The truth was simple. No one remembered what humanity had done to earn the rule. There were no clear records of massive fleets or shattered stars. There were only fragments, redacted documents, and warnings written in careful language. Humanity had never needed to remind the galaxy why the rule existed. They had relied on memory, and memory was fading. On one distant human world, Alan stood at a window overlooking a quiet city. Ships moved slowly through the sky, following steady paths. There were no alarms, no signs of concern. Mark joined him, holding a data pad. "They're getting closer," Mark said. Alan nodded. "We expected this. Do you think they'll listen?" Alan did not answer right away. He watched the ships for a long moment. "They never do," he said softly. Elsewhere, Sarah prepared another message to the Union. The wording was familiar. Polite, clear, calm. She had sent versions of it many times before. "Please respect our borders. Please do not interfere. Please maintain distance." She paused before sending it, her expression thoughtful but not afraid. Humanity had always hoped the rule would be enough. Outside human space, younger civilizations debated loudly, convinced they were standing at the edge of a great opportunity. They saw resources, territory, and proof that the old fears were false. They did not see the deeper pattern. They did not understand that humanity's quiet nature was not the result of weakness, but of choice. And as the galaxy moved closer, step by careless step, the rule that once protected everyone grew thinner with each passing year. The warning had not disappeared. It had simply been ignored. The decision was made quietly at first. The rising empire had grown quickly in recent decades. Their worlds were crowded, their factories never slept, and their fleets moved constantly from system to system. Expansion was not a desire for them. It was a need. Without new resources, their growth would slow, and slowing was seen as failure. Their leaders studied the outer maps of known space. That was where they noticed the human border systems. Large regions. Low traffic. Minimal patrols. Rich asteroid belts and stable stars. Too perfect to ignore. Advisors mentioned the old rule. Never disturb humanity. The words were read aloud in council chambers, but they carried no weight. No one could explain the reason behind them. No record showed punishment. No clear example existed. One leader finally said what many had been thinking. "If they were dangerous," he said, "we would know." The others agreed. The first ships crossed the border without resistance. Sensors detected no alarms. No patrols arrived. The system was quiet, almost empty. Automated markers identified it as human territory, but nothing else happened. Encouraged, the Empire moved faster. Mining stations were established around resource-rich asteroids. Heavy machines dug into stone that had not been touched for centuries. Trade routes were redirected. Cargo ships began to move freely through the system, marking it as claimed space. Reports were sent back to the Empire's core worlds. Human response: none. That silence was celebrated. In the wider galaxy, observers noticed the movement. Messages were exchanged. Some older civilizations expressed concern, but no official action was taken. The Empire's expansion was legal under most Union laws. Only the old rule stood in the way, and that rule had no clear punishment attached. On a distant human world, the news arrived without urgency. Ethan read the report carefully. The words were precise. Locations, ship counts, station names. Everything was confirmed. He closed the file and stood up. There was no anger in his face. No surprise. Human leadership gathered in a simple room. No banners. No guards in heavy armor. Just people seated around a table, listening. "They've crossed the border," Ethan said. "They've taken control of the system." One voice asked, "Any signs of hostility?" "No," Ethan replied. "Only occupation." Another asked, "Civilian presence?" "Minimal. Automated stations. Mining crews." There was a short silence. Then Ethan spoke again. "I will send the message." No one objected. The message was brief, clear, polite. It stated that the system was human territory. It requested immediate withdrawal. It offered peaceful resolution. There were no threats, no deadlines, no mention of consequences. Ethan sent it through official channels, addressed directly to the Empire's Central Command. Then he waited. The response came faster than expected. The Empire laughed. Not openly, not in public broadcasts, but in private council meetings. The message was read aloud and dismissed. Some found the wording almost amusing. "That's it?" one officer said. "No warning? No demand?" Another replied, "They don't even sound angry." Analysts suggested ignoring it. Others proposed sending a reply asserting legal ownership through expansion rights. In the end they chose silence. No fleets were sent to defend the stations. No weapons were powered up. No retaliation followed. The Empire took this as confirmation. Across the galaxy, opinions shifted quickly. News spread that humanity had been challenged and had done nothing. The old rule was discussed openly now, not in whispers but in debates and broadcasts. See, commentators said. They're just like everyone else. Some suggested that humanity no longer had the strength to enforce their borders. Others claimed they never had. A few older species remained uneasy. They noticed patterns others ignored. Human trade routes subtly changed. Some data channels went dark. Observational probes lost contact when approaching human space. But these details were buried under louder news. The Empire expanded deeper into the system. New stations were built. Military escorts appeared, not to fight humans, but to protect against pirates and rivals. Human markers were removed and replaced. Still nothing happened. Ethan sent no further messages. That worried some observers. They expected protests, speeches, or appeals to the Union. Humanity did none of that. They did not call emergency sessions. They did not accuse. They did not threaten sanctions. They simply went quiet. Within human territory, civilian traffic adjusted. Ships changed routes. Outposts were evacuated smoothly and without panic. To an outside observer it looked like retreat. Inside it was something else. Human analysts studied the Empire carefully. They mapped supply lines, communication hubs, and dependencies. They watched how the Empire moved, how it reacted to small changes, how tightly connected its systems were. Ethan was briefed daily. He listened. He asked questions. He gave no orders. The Empire mistook this silence for fear. Their leaders spoke proudly of the success. They claimed humanity had been exposed as weak. Expansion plans grew more ambitious. Border patrols pushed even closer. At a Union gathering, a representative boldly stated that the old rule should be removed entirely. It has no meaning, he said. We have proof. Human representatives were present. They said nothing. Alan sat quietly in the chamber, hands folded, eyes forward. Mark stood beside him, unreadable. Sarah was absent. That absence went unnoticed. The Empire continued operations. Mining output increased. Trade profits rose. Confidence grew. Then small things began to change. Supply delays occurred, minor at first. A shipment failed to arrive on time. A communication relay dropped out briefly, then returned. Navigation data required recalibration more often than usual. Nothing alarming. Just inconvenience. Engineers blamed software issues. Commanders blamed logistics. No one blamed humanity. Ethan received confirmation that the Empire had formally claimed the system. He acknowledged the report with a single word. Understood. There was no sign of urgency. No raised voices. No emergency orders. To the galaxy it looked like the rule had finally been proven wrong. Humanity had been tested. And humanity had stepped aside. That belief settled deeply and comfortably into the minds of those watching. It felt good to believe old fears were false. It felt even better to believe strength had won without a fight. The Empire celebrated quietly, unaware that their first mistake had already been made. They had crossed the border. They had ignored the warning. And they had mistaken silence for surrender. Human space went quiet. At first no one noticed. Silence was normal for humanity. They had never filled communication channels with noise or public displays. They did not broadcast their strength or announce their movements. Quiet was their natural state. But this silence was different. Long-range observers noticed that human ships were no longer appearing on public tracking networks. Trade vessels that once passed through neutral corridors stopped showing up. Research craft vanished from shared registries. Even automated probes sent near human space failed to return data. It did not look like retreat. It looked like absence. At border systems, sensors still detected human structures, but traffic patterns changed. Ports remained active, yet ships did not leave. Patrol routes ended suddenly as if erased. No distress calls were recorded. No signs of panic appeared. Human ships did not flee. They disappeared. The Empire occupying the border system noticed this and felt pleased. To them it confirmed victory without battle. Humanity had stepped back, unwilling or unable to resist. But others felt uneasy. Several older species quietly began to leave nearby systems. Entire populations relocated without public explanation. Trade hubs were abandoned. Ancient stations powered down and drifted into cold orbit. When questioned, their leaders offered vague answers. Strategic adjustment. Long-term planning. Risk reduction. None mentioned humanity. In private they spoke differently. Old records were opened. Sealed archives were accessed for the first time in centuries. Files long thought irrelevant were reviewed again, slowly and carefully. What they found was incomplete but enough. Long ago humanity had reached a choice point. At the height of their early expansion, they had possessed the means to dominate large regions of space. Their technology had advanced rapidly. Their population had grown. Their fleets had been strong. But they had stopped. They did not collapse. They did not lose knowledge. They did not suffer defeat. They chose restraint. The record suggested that humanity studied the galaxy and reached a conclusion most species never did. Ruling others created endless conflict. Control through force required constant pressure. Empires burned themselves out. Humanity decided not to rule the galaxy. They chose something else. Control without conquest. The archives did not explain exactly how this was done. Much of the data was removed or restricted. What remained were patterns and warnings. Humanity invested heavily in systems that shaped conditions rather than battles. Infrastructure. Navigation standards. Communication protocols. Dependencies that grew quietly over time. They did not build the largest fleets. They built the foundations everyone else used. As these discoveries spread quietly among the older species, fear returned. Meanwhile, the Empire continued to expand operations in the captured system. They noticed odd issues but dismissed them. Navigation systems required constant recalibration. Star charts disagreed with one another. Supply ships arrived late or not at all. Communication delays grew longer, measured in minutes, than hours. Technicians blamed software errors. Commanders blamed poor maintenance. They did not look outward. In human space, preparations continued without announcement. Ethan no longer sent messages. Alan and Mark were absent from union halls. Human observers withdrew from joint projects. Human data feeds went offline one by one, always with polite explanations. Maintenance. Internal review. Temporary suspension. Sarah's communication channel was closed entirely. Inside human territory, movement increased but it was hidden. Ships used paths not listed on shared maps. Signals were masked or folded into background noise. To outside sensors, nothing unusual appeared. Humanity was not mobilizing. They were aligning. Old species watching closely noticed something else. The Empire's ships relied heavily on shared navigation infrastructure. Their communication relays depended on standards developed long ago, many of them originally proposed by humanity. Those systems had always worked. Until now. Small failures became larger. Messages arrived out of order. Fleet coordination slowed. Automated trade systems flagged errors they could not resolve. The Empire issued updates and patches. Problems continued. Still, no human fleet appeared. No weapons were fired. No threats were made. That confused many. Some wondered if humanity was truly gone, withdrawn into isolation forever. Others believed they were watching the slow collapse of a once important civilization. The older species knew better. They remembered fragments of conversations, warnings passed down without context. When humans prepare for war, one ancient record said, they do not gather soldiers. They change the rules everyone else depends on. The Empire remained confident. Their leaders believed the situation was under control. Minor issues, nothing more. Expansion continued, though at a slower pace. Then human space went completely dark. Not a single active signal crossed the border. Even background emissions vanished. It was as if an entire region of the galaxy had been erased from observation. This alarmed even the boldest voices. Emergency meetings were called. Analysts argued. Some suggested this was dangerous. Others claimed it was a bluff. No one knew what humanity was doing. Inside human systems, life continued normally. Cities functioned. Networks operated. Research centers worked without interruption. There was no panic. No emergency broadcasts. Humans trusted their processes. Ethan received a simple update confirming readiness across multiple sectors. He read it, nodded once and closed the file. There was no celebration. No speeches. Only confirmation. The Empire experienced its first serious disruption soon after. A major trade convoy failed to arrive. Tracking systems showed it drifting far off course, engines intact but navigation locked. Rescue ships struggled to reach it due to conflicting data. Soon after, a border fleet lost synchronization during a routine maneuver. Ships arrived at different coordinates, separated by vast distances. It took days to regroup. Still no attack came. The galaxy began to feel a slow tightening, like invisible hands adjusting something fundamental. Older civilizations finished their evacuations. They did not announce it. They simply left. To the younger species, it looked like fear without cause. To those who remembered, it looked like survival. The truth was becoming clear piece by piece. Humanity had never planned to fight the galaxy. They had planned to make fighting impossible. And as systems quietly shifted, as dependencies failed and assumptions broke, the silence from human space became heavy with meaning. The galaxy had believed the rule was wrong. Now it was beginning to understand that the rule had never been about fear. It had been about consequence. One cycle later, the change became impossible to ignore. The Empire woke to a galaxy that no longer answered them. At first, it felt like a technical failure. Long-range signals sent to trade partners returned nothing. Messages to border allies showed no confirmation. Automated couriers reported delays without explanation. Command centers stayed calm. Systems were checked. Engineers worked through the night. Reports were filed and reviewed. Then ships began to report limits. A cargo vessel attempted a routine jump between two nearby systems. The jump failed. Not violently. Not dangerously. The ship simply did not go where it was meant to go. It emerged far short of its destination, fuel drained, navigation locked. Another ship tried again, adjusting parameters. Same result. Soon it became clear that their ships could no longer travel far. Short movements worked. Local travel was possible. But anything that required complex navigation failed in quiet, controlled ways. No alarms. No damage. Just denial. Military fleets were ordered to test long-range movement. They failed as well. Ships arrived late, scattered, or not at all. Coordinated travel became impossible. Fleet formations broke apart before they could even form. The Empire's strength had always depended on speed and reach. Now both were gone. Communication followed the same pattern. Signals sent across great distances faded into static. Relays powered on but did not connect. Old backup channels behaved the same way. The Empire tried to reroute messages through neutral systems. Those systems did not answer. Trade collapsed next. Merchant ships could not guarantee delivery. Insurance systems failed. Automated markets froze when confirmation signals never returned. Goods piled up in storage. Food shipments spoiled. Factories slowed then stopped. Allies grew distant. At first they offered sympathy. Then concern. Then silence. Some claimed they were experiencing similar issues. Others stopped responding altogether. Trade agreements were quietly suspended. Military support clauses went unmentioned. The Empire called for emergency Union sessions. The Union did not respond. Panic began to spread through lower command levels. Leaders tried to maintain order, issuing statements that the situation was temporary. Engineers promised fixes. Analysts suggested patience. But the galaxy had already moved on. Other civilizations adjusted quickly. They changed routes. They updated systems. They accepted new standards without question. Their ships continued to fly. Only the Empire was left behind. Observers noticed something else. The captured human border system remained intact. Stations still functioned. Mining operations continued. But the Empire could no longer move resources out efficiently. Ships leaving the system failed to reach core worlds. The system had become a trap. Not sealed. Not attacked. Just disconnected. The Empire considered military action at last. Plans were drawn up. Targets selected. Fleets prepared. The orders were never carried out. There was no way to send the fleets. Weeks passed. Then months. Civil unrest grew as supplies dwindled. Worlds that depended on imported food rationed carefully. Energy shortages spread. Communication blackouts isolated entire regions. Still, no explosions shook the stars. No battles were fought. Humanity remained invisible. Then one day a signal appeared. It was simple, clean, unmistakably human. Every functioning receiver across the galaxy picked it up at the same time. The signal did not use Union channels. It did not rely on shared relays. It arrived everywhere, clearly and without distortion. The Empire received it as well. The broadcast showed a single figure seated in a plain room. No flags. No guards. No symbols of authority. Just a woman with calm eyes and steady posture. Her name was Claire. She spoke slowly, clearly, and without emotion. For a long time, she said, "We asked for distance." Her voice carried no anger. No pride. We were clear. We were polite. We believed that would be enough. Images appeared beside her. Maps. Trade flows. communication lines, networks that span the galaxy. Many bore marks of human origin, old and quietly integrated. We did not build these systems to control you, Claire continued. We built them to connect you. The images changed. Lines faded. Nodes dimmed. But connection is a choice, she said. And choices have limits. The Empire's leaders watched in silence. Some understood already. Others still hoped this was a threat that could be answered. Claire looked directly into the camera. We asked you to stop, she said. This is us stopping you. The broadcast ended. No countdown followed. No further instructions were given. But the message was complete. The galaxy reacted immediately. Older civilizations exhaled in relief. Younger ones froze in fear. Neutral systems rushed to confirm their own connections were intact. They were. Only the Empire remained cut off. Their ships still worked. Their world still lived. Their people still existed. But they were alone. Attempts to negotiate followed. Messages were sent through every possible channel. None reached human space. There were no replies. Humanity did not speak again. Over time, the Empire adapted to isolation. Local trade resumed. Short-range travel continued. Life went on, smaller and slower than before. They were not destroyed. They were contained. The lesson spread quickly, carried not by words but by observation. Humanity did not fight wars the galaxy understood. They did not need to. They did not punish through destruction. They removed access. And everyone watching understood the meaning of the old rule at last. It had never been a threat. It had been a boundary. And once crossed, there was no way back. Centuries passed. Time reshaped the galaxy in quiet ways. Stars shifted, borders moved, and new civilizations rose from worlds once uninhabited. Old empires faded into history, remembered only through records and lessons. Technology advanced, then slowed, then advanced again. But one thing never changed. The rule. It was no longer questioned or debated. It was no longer treated as a rumor or a strange tradition. It became one of the first laws taught to every new civilization that joined the wider galactic community. Never disturb humanity. Children learned it in early education centers. Cadets memorized it during training. Leaders repeated it during first contact briefings. It was spoken clearly and without humor. Not as a threat. As a fact. The story of the isolated empire became required study. Not every detail was included. No one needed the technical explanations anymore. What mattered was the outcome. An empire had crossed a line. Humanity had responded. The empire still existed, but it no longer mattered. Maps showed its space marked differently. Not destroyed. Not forbidden. Simply separate. A quiet region, untouched and unreachable. No one went there. Humanity, meanwhile, returned to silence. They did not expand. They did not claim new systems. They did not rebuild diplomatic influence. Their space remained stable, unchanged, and clearly defined. Occasionally, human ships were seen at great distances, moving calmly through deep space. Sometimes a human observer appeared briefly at a Union event, listened without comment, and left without explanation. They never spoke of the past. They never explained themselves. And no one asked. New civilizations often wondered why humanity held no formal leadership positions. Why they did not guide policy or enforce peace. Why they chose distance instead of dominance. Older species answered simply. They don't need to. Human worlds remained ordinary in appearance. Cities grew slowly. Technology improved carefully. Life continued in ways that looked familiar and unremarkable. That appearance was intentional. Humanity had no interest in ruling the galaxy. Power brought attention. Attention brought conflict. Conflict brought waste. They had already solved that problem long ago. Archives recorded that after the incident, humanity quietly restored shared systems for the rest of the galaxy. Trade networks stabilized. Navigation standards returned stronger than before. Communication became clearer, faster, and more reliable. The galaxy flourished. No one forgot who made that possible. The isolated empire tried, over many generations, to reconnect. They sent messages into the dark. They launched probes toward the borders. They attempted to rebuild lost systems using old data. Nothing worked. Humanity never replied. Eventually, even those attempts stopped. The empire adapted to a smaller existence. Their history books spoke carefully of the mistake. Children were taught that some boundaries could not be crossed twice. They survived. But they were no longer a threat. Among the stars, the lesson spread beyond words. Strength was no longer measured only by fleets or weapons. True power was seen in preparation, patience, and restraint. The ability to act, and the wisdom not to, became the highest form of respect. Humanity embodied that balance. Alan, Mark, Sarah, Ethan, and Claire became names found only in old records. Their images appeared briefly in educational archives, always calm, always composed. They were remembered not as conquerors but as caretakers of a boundary. Humanity did not celebrate what they had done. They did not build monuments or declare victory days. They did not tell the story themselves. The galaxy told it for them. Whenever a young civilization grew too ambitious, elders reminded them quietly of the rule. Whenever borders were tested, someone would ask a simple question. Is it human space? If the answer was yes, discussions ended. Over time, fear faded and was replaced by understanding. Humanity was not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they were precise. They did not destroy worlds. They removed options. They did not end lives. They ended paths. The galaxy finally understood what had always been true. Humanity had never been weak. Their quiet nature was not hesitation. Their distance was not fear. It was control. They waited because they could. They acted only when needed. And when they did, the outcome was final. So the rule remained. Written. Spoken. Remembered. Never disturb humanity. Not because they would attack, but because, once forced to act, they would never need to act again.